So when you say you can't comment on something, and as it relates to something that's classified, is have you had to go through some process? There's a book in front of me called Imminent, which is the book you've written. It says Inside the Pentagon's Hunt for UFOs. What is the process when you're writing books like this to get information cleared so that you can share it?
It's like birthing an elephant.
Right.
I can only imagine if I was ever a woman and had to give birth.
Because they probably don't want you talking about these things.
There's a lot of people that don't want us talking about this. But there's also a lot that do. So you go through a process. It's called DOPSR. In the U.S. government, we love our acronyms. It stands for Department of Defense, Office of Pre-Publication and Security Review. As a former defense official, if I want to write anything, it has to go through a review process to make sure it's not classified and I can talk about it. That book went through an exhaustive, almost 1-year process through the government before they allowed me to publish it. And even then, they redacted portions of it. If you look in there, you will see grayed out portions because I wanted Americans to see what some people don't need to see. And so those redactions are there by the government. And it is a very exhaustive process, but it's important because that's what keeps us legal. That's what keeps people like me not going to jail because I go through the proper procedures. I'm not a leaker. I have never leaked classified information. I will never discuss classified information. An unauthorized disclosure is something that should be avoided at all times. Like I said, I'm a patriot. I'm loyal to my country. I'm not disloyal. So there's a right way and a wrong way to do things. So if you want to write a book and you want to talk about things you're not sure you can talk about, you go through this DOPSR process. And that's exactly what I did. And that's how that book was able to be published. Otherwise, right now, it'd probably be in jail.
Is there a single most compelling piece of evidence that you were witness to as it relates to your belief in UFOs and UAPs?
They were all significant. There wasn't one that said, oh, that's it, because they were all compelling in their own way, whether you can go back to the USS Nimitz incident in 2004 or the Roosevelt incidents in 2014 and 2015. There was so much data. Every time you think you had one that was great, another would come in that was even better. So,
I mean, you've put one on the front cover of this book though, right?
Yeah.
What is this incident on the front cover of your book?
That is known as the Gimbal incident. That is a video that was taken by an F-18, and you can hear the exacerbation. If you listen to the actual video, you can hear the pilots trying to discuss what it is. And then you also hear on it the discussion of, there's a whole fleet of them, look at the ASA, and oh, by the way, it's going 120 knots against the wind at roughly 20,000 feet. So it's not a balloon. And you begin to see this vehicle orientate itself in a 90-degree angle. Now, if this was a plane, like here's your wings, if you go in a 90-degree angle, you lose altitude, right? Because that's how the principles of lift work. That's not the case there.
I think this is the video. So.
Yep.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS, though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's, look at that thing. It's rotating.
And that was shot by 2 US sort of fighter pilots.
Yep.
And
There's a lot more of those out there, and a lot clearer too, but they're classified.
So there's more videos like this that you've been exposed to.
Oh yeah,
but they won't release them.
They will not release them.
Why?
Because of sources and methods. Because they remain classified. Because how they were taken, where they were taken, under what circumstances, what technological capabilities were used to collect the information. The U.S. government wants to keep out of the hands of its adversaries what our true capabilities are. So let's say you're flying a mission over a denied area and you don't want the enemy to know that you're over it, right? The last thing you want to do is release a video where you can look and say, oh, we're in this location and now the enemy knows, or we have this capability, or we can see this good. These are the technologies we have. These videos here, ironically, are probably some of the least compelling videos. Now, people say, oh, these are incredible, but these are the ones that were unclassified that could be released. The other ones, some of these are so clear. The problem is how they were taken, the collection capabilities that were used to take them, where they were taken, under what circumstances, the metadata in the video, all that is a consideration.
Okay. And do the US government and the Pentagon generally want people to believe that UFOs, UAPs exist or not?
I think it's both. I think up until recently, nobody wanted to have this conversation. The problem is the government backed itself up after 70 years of denial into a corner, and it has to figure a way out. There are some elements now that want the conversation to occur. And so that's why you see Congress getting engaged, why the creation of Arrow. But there are still elements, unfortunately, in the Pentagon that don't want this conversation to occur. And they will continue doing what they can to discredit individuals and launch this campaign against them. One of my colleagues, David Grush, who was a decorated Air Force officer and a senior intelligence official, the moment he broke rank and went public about this topic, within 24 hours, they released his medical records trying to discredit him, and they did it illegally. So there are people there that definitely don't want this conversation to occur.
Why?
Well, there's a lot of reasons why. Back historically, great question. Let's, can I unpack that a little bit?
Yeah.
Do you mind that? Okay, so let's start really at the heels of World War II. You have these Foo Fighters that are being observed by Allied pilots, these luminous balls that would follow them into combat areas. And then after, particularly as we started developing in the atomic weapons, we started releasing a lot of UFOs over our controlled military airspace and over our sensitive military installations, our research facilities. And so at the time you have this mindset, you have height of the Cold War, United States versus Soviet Union. And by the way, they had nukes, and so did we, right? So you've got a real potential threat over there. And then you've got these other things over here. So as a general in the Pentagon, you say, look, I know these things are real, but they're not showing any overt hostilities. Meanwhile, we've got this real issue over here, this real threat called Soviet Union. Let's focus on this threat, and then we'll worry about this other stuff later. The other part of that is the mindset of, look, it's really uncomfortable as a government to have a conversation with its people about a problem that there's no solution for, right? We can see what they do, but there's not a damn thing we can do about it. We can't stop what they're doing. And so do you really want to have a conversation with the American people and admit a problem for which we don't have a solution for it? That governments are solution focused. And that is not a great spot to be in, right? And it's, by the way, not the first time this has happened. Let's look at the U-2, for example, spy plane. When we first built that, the CIA commissioned it through Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and we were flying that vehicle in contravention to a standing treaty we had with Russia that we would not fly manned reconnaissance missions over Russia, mainland Russia. We were. But we built this plane to fly so fast and so high, we thought they couldn't detect us, right? And for a while, we thought they couldn't because we went unchallenged until the Russians were able to develop the surface-to-air missile, SA-2 missile, and successfully shoot one down. And then, and only then, did they admit to the world, we've been tracking these things since day one. The reason why they didn't talk about it is because they didn't have a means to shoot it down. So why admit a problem for which there's no solution until you have a solution? So that's another mindset in the Pentagon. And then you had several studies done that were commissioned by the U.S. government in the past that asked the question, if we were to be honest and truthful about disclosure, about we're not alone in the universe, these things are real, what would the consequences be? And these studies came back, unanimously said, you can't do it. The American people are not ready to have this conversation. It'll cause civil discord, and it'll upset the population, and people will lose faith in their religions, and the economy may crash. You can't do it. And so the decision was made, okay, we're not going to do it. In fact, we're going to actively suppress this information. We're going to stigmatize the heck out of it so bad that no one will ever want to even mention the word UFO. And it was very successful. That campaign to stigmatize this topic was so successful, in fact, that even now it's hard to unwind the tape and have the conversation. And so therein lies part of the problem. Why doesn't parts of the government want to have this conversation? Then you've got a legal issue, which is probably the biggest issue now. You have elements in the government that were making unilateral decisions not to inform Congress and not to inform the President of the United States, right? That's illegal. There are oversight committees that have a designated need to know on all intelligence matters, especially when it comes to funding, right? We're spending billions of dollars on these projects. You've got to inform Congress. Certain elements of certain oversight committees, like the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, they weren't being briefed to this. There's also this fear by some people on the inside of the government that, oh my gosh, I used to work on a secret UFO program. Am I going to be in trouble now because, we've been lying to Congress? And so it's a little more complicated than necessarily just saying, oh, well, we want the truth, be honest. It's not that easy.
To your knowledge, has there ever been recovered UAP or UFO materials?
What I can say is what I've been allowed to say, which is yes. Up until recently, I wasn't even allowed to say that.
When did that change?
When that book got reviewed. Up until that point, I had signed documentation from the government saying I will never discuss that, ever.
What happens if you did?
Oh, jail. Oh, yeah. That's why that book, I had to go through the process, because what I wrote in that book, I am allowed to talk about. I can't go beyond that, but at least I can talk about that. And in the book, I talk about, yes, that the government is in possession of material, exotic material that doesn't look like it's made by us.
Has there ever been anyone sent to jail because they've spoken about this subject matter?
Worse. And that story has yet to be told. Yes, there are people who have had faced extreme disciplinary actions and potentially worse.
The death penalty?
I'm not going to elaborate right now because there's some things happening to try to. This is why Congress is working hard for whistleblower protections, because we want people to feel safe to come out and have a conversation. And right now they don't feel overly safe. They've seen some of the tactics and techniques that were applied to try to keep people quiet in the past. Let me say this in general terms. People say, oh, well, the government would never kill anybody to protect a secret. Try going to Area 51 and look at the signs on that chain link fence where it says lethal force authorized. You cross that fence and they can kill you dead. Okay? So the government can, under certain extreme cases, under certain extreme situations and conditions, they can do whatever they need to do to protect national security, and they will.
Which department is that?
I cannot go into that conversation, unfortunately.
Because people think of it as maybe the CIA or something, but
I can't elaborate, unfortunately.
You know, because I know very little about American governmental departments and such, but obviously most of the world knows about the like presidential assassinations and things like that. So, and I've spoken to a few CIA agents and stuff like that on my podcast before, but I've never really understood, frankly, who would be making such an order and how those things don't leak. You know.
Well, you know. Good question. Look, we've done it in the past, in other situations, some pretty recently. I'll give you a case in point, and this is not, attacking anybody. We have used drones to lethally kill people, Americans, an American citizen specifically, and the person's child, without due process.
In the U.S.?
Not in the U.S. He was a U.S. citizen.
Oh.
He was suspected of being a terrorist, and there's some other things there. I'm not going to go in there. But we as American citizens we are afforded something called due process under the law of peace. And meaning you get your day in court no matter what. And there have been Americans where that hasn't been the case. They didn't get a day in court. Someone made the decision to liquidate them. There are examples of that happening. There's another one with Rosenbergs, those who were accused of selling the atomic secrets to the Russians, actually giving it to them. And if you know a little bit about what happened with his wife, turns out that she was innocent.
What happened to his wife?
They hung her and him for espionage. But because of the information that we had at the time, was so sensitive, we'd have to reveal a capability. So unfortunately, it looks like maybe we may have done something that we maybe shouldn't have done. I wasn't around for that, so I can't tell you definitively what happened. I can only tell you what my understanding of it is. I could absolutely be wrong, and I really hope I am. But it turns out that, there are extreme examples where we will take drastic measures to protect national security.
So in writing this book and in talking about the subjects, you understand that there's some people that don't want you talking about these subjects.
Oh, yeah.
So, and you also understand that the punishment for talking about these subjects can range from jail or worse.
Yep.
So are you not scared?
I didn't say that. I didn't say I wasn't scared. I mean, I'm taking huge risks. My life has been threatened many times, and it's very concerning for me. It's a reason why I live in Wyoming and I'm heavily armed and have now 6 German Shepherds. Yeah, I'm very cautious and careful, but I'm also understanding. I also know the left and right limits of the law, and I'm not going to break the law under any circumstances. This book isn't a leak. I'm authorized to talk about that book because I went through the proper processes of getting it reviewed, whether they like it or not. But yes, I am absolutely worried. This is why I'm very careful when I say things, because I don't want to. I'll walk up to the line. I will not step over the line. I will not violate my security oath and compromise national security for disclosure. And I don't think I have to. I think the proof is in the pudding, the fact that it's been 7 years and we've come this far in the conversation and I haven't gone to jail and I'm still here to have the conversation, I think is indicative of the fact that there is a right way and a wrong way to do it. I understand people want disclosure and they want it now. But I've told people before, there's a difference between doing things right and doing things right now. They're different. And we only get one chance to do this right. And so hopefully we can have this conversation, this collective conversation in a way where we don't have to be disruptive. No one has to be threatened. No one has to go to jail. No one has to lose their jobs or anything like that.
You mentioned presidents earlier on. Do presidents of the United States know about UFOs?
Some do, some do not. Unfortunately, there's a mindset by some people that think that politicians and presidents are temporary hires. They're here today, gone in 4 years. So why brief them up on something, especially if they have no military or intelligence background? It's a risk. So you know what? Don't brief them.
Which presidents do you think were aware of UFOs and these kinds of programs?
Sure. Well, we know for sure there were several. For sure, for example, Carter was. But then,
how do you know?
Clinton, well, because Carter was briefed. I know somebody who actually worked with Carter to get information on this topic. I won't say the person's name. The person's still alive, so I don't have permission to talk about that. But we know that for a fact, and there's records of it. But there's other presidents like Bill Clinton, who wasn't briefed but wanted to be briefed, right? And so, and again, this is the crux of the problem. Who's making the decision on what president gets briefed and what doesn't? That's nonsense. President George Bush Sr. was briefed when he was also the director of the CIA. So he was very well aware of this topic. But then there's other presidents that weren't. And so this is highlighting the very problem that I have. Who's making the decision to choose who gets briefed and who doesn't?
What about Obama and Trump?
I can't answer for them. Obama has recently stated for the record that these UAP are a national security issue, not a threat, but an issue, that there's something there, that these are real, whatever they are, whatever it is. President Trump recently, former President Trump said a week and a half ago, for the record, when asked, that he would be willing to release the UFO files and that he wanted to do it in the past, but he faced fierce resistance. Now think about that statement for a minute. Who the hell is giving him resistance to releasing UFO files when you're the president, right? That is a very significant statement. That is what needs to be fixed. If the president himself can't get or herself can't get a briefing, who in the hell has the authority to make that decision? Nobody.
What is that fierce resistance that Trump's talking about?
I don't know. You'd have to ask Trump.
What do you think it is?
I think there is a huge amount of influence by the military-industrial complex, and it is an enormous business. Always has been. It's huge. It is probably the world's largest business globally.
And why wouldn't the military-industrial complex want those files to be released?
Well, because they have to admit that they're part of the programs. Some of these folks, have been a lot of their successes is being able to work super secret programs for the U.S. government, and maybe there's technology that they don't want released. Maybe there's capabilities that we had that we don't want to tell our adversaries. I mean, there's a lot of reasons for it, which are understand. Some of them are actually legitimate. I can understand. I don't agree with, but I can understand.
How much do you think the average person on the street knows about what goes on in the Pentagon and behind the scenes of the government?
Brother, forget the government and Pentagon. How many parents, they can tell you who's a quarterback of their favorite football team and they can tell you their stats, but how many parents know who their kid sits next to during lunch or in second period math class? Government is, that's basic facts, man. We, as humans, most of us, we suck. We don't know anything, and we're so used to being force-fed information by whatever outlet du jour we want to tune into. If I'm a liberal, I'll watch this. If I'm a conservative, I'll watch that. I'll go straight to my echo chamber, and hear what I want to hear and have people tell me not only information that they think I need to know, but even my opinion of what it should be about. This is a much, much bigger issue than just UFOs and UAP. We as people have become extremely lazy, and we no longer are willing to ask the hard questions. We're not.
You were part of one program, but you also referenced a second program called the Legacy Program.
Mm-hmm.
What is the Legacy Program?
It is the traditional, long-held effort by the U.S. government to study UAP. People think ATIP was the only program in OSAP. Before that, there was Blue Book, and before that, the Legacy Program is the collaborative effort of individuals over the course of several decades that have been looking into this topic for the U.S. government and by the U.S. government.
And okay, just doing similar things to what ATIP did.
Yes, and more robust and much more well-funded.
I wonder why they don't fund it as well these days.
There's a reason for that too that I would need permission to talk about. There were some distractions in the early 2000s that lifted and shifted resources away from efforts to something else. You probably can figure out what that was, but there was an enormous resource drain and refocusing in the early 2000s to focus on something else. And so
I heard you talk as well about this sort of different types of aliens per se, because when we think of aliens, we reflect on movies that we've seen, and they have like the big heads and things like that, and maybe they're like white, tall, skinny with like the big arms and the big legs and stuff like that. Is that what people in the Pentagon consider aliens to be? What we see in movies?
I can't speak on behalf of other people. I can only speak on behalf of me. I've been very, very careful not to stereotype anybody or anything. I think it's important. We have to keep an open mind, because when you say the word aliens, you are automatically presuming that these things are from outer space. Mm-hmm. They might not be. There's lots of different options. It doesn't have to be from outer space.
What do you believe? Do you believe they're amongst us?
Well, Can I explore this with you?
Mm-hmm.
This question? Okay, so it's not an either or. So in the beginning of our conversation, I told you I went to the University of Miami and I studied microbiology, immunology, and the study of parasites. Now, if you go to some anthropologists, they will suggest to you that modern human beings, Homo sapiens sapien, has been around roughly between 100 to possibly 200,000 years. So on a 24-hour clock, right, it's only the last 2,000 years. And it was the Greeks that proposed there were two fundamental life forms on this planet. And you were either a plant or you were an animal. And human beings were an animal. And so the 24-hour clock, you're probably talking maybe, 10 minutes ago, before midnight. Well, it was 300 years ago, during the Renaissance or the days of Enlightenment, that we discovered an entire new life form on this planet that's been here all along. And that was neither plant nor animal. It was the world of fungus. And we pat ourselves on the shoulder and say, hey, we found a new life form. In this 24-hour clock, it's been probably the last maybe 10 seconds, last 120 years only, that we discovered for the first time the true dominant alpha life form on this planet. And in fact, if you take all the biomass of every plant and all the biomass of every animal and all the biomass of every fungus and added it all up together, it still will not equal the biomass of this hidden yet dominant life form that's been on this planet all along. And it wasn't until we could have the technology to curve glass and look through a little tube and famously shout the words, little beasties, did we discover the world of microorganisms. Okay, the true dominant life form on this planet that's been here all along. In fact, it's inside of us. It makes us up. It's pervasive everywhere. And we just discovered it. So when I say to people, when people say, oh, do you think from outer space? They can be from outer space, inner space, or frankly, the space in between. These things could be just as natural to our environment as we are. Maybe we're at the point now where technologically we can start interacting. Maybe they're from under the ocean. Look, less than 10% of the ocean floor has been mapped. We know more about the surface of the moon than we do of our own oceans. Is it possible these things are just as natural to this planet as we are? Possibly. Or is it possible these things are from somewhere else? Yes, that's possible too. So we have to keep all options on the table until they're no longer on the table. We live in an infinitely complex universe. See if I can, and I've often used this before to try to help people wrap their heads around this. We perceive life through five fundamental senses. And if we can't touch it, taste it, hear it, smell it, etc., we can't interact with it. We have no idea it's there. Where I live out in Wyoming, we have these beautiful night skies, unoccluded night skies, and you can see all the heavens, beautiful Milky Way in front of you. If you were to look through that same night sky through a radio telescope, you would see something different. You would see nebula. You would see things that you can't normally perceive in the ultraviolet and infrared spectrums and X-ray, right? It's there, you just can't perceive it. It's just like if you had cell phone vision. All of a sudden now you can see in Wi-Fi and 5G. You would see an entirely different reality around you. So we perceive life through a very narrow spectrum of visible light, the visible light spectrum, when reality is most everything else kind of lies beyond that. And then you have a scale issue. You have a scalability issue. What do I mean by scalability? We are a human being. You and I are having a lovely conversation here somewhere in some place on this planet, revolving around an obscure star in an obscure part of the Milky Way galaxy amongst a supercluster of other galaxies. The visible horizon from any direction we look at of light, the size of the universe, has been estimated to be between 13.6 to 13.9 billion light years. Billion. What is a light year? A light year is the distance that a photon of light can travel in the course of a year. And how fast is that? Well, light travels at roughly 186,000 miles per second, or 7.5 times around our planet in 1 second, right? Really fast. Imagine how far that goes in a year, and now imagine how far that goes 13.9 billion years, right? So we're in the middle of the universe here. Our universal horizon in any direction is 13.9 billion light years. And in that direction, another 13.9, so roughly 27 billion light years across, and we're in the middle. Now, scientists are estimating that's less than 10% of the actual size of the universe. The universe is actually much, much bigger than that. This is just the universal horizon, because the expansion of the universe, light this far will never reach Earth. So now you're talking about a size 100 billion light years, and as small as we are right in the middle, this infinitesimally small speck, keep in mind, in our visible universe alone, there are more stars than there are grains of sand in all the beaches in all the world. Think about that incomprehensible number. And as small as we are. Now, humor me with this. Take one atom, one hydrogen atom, Avogadro's number, 1 times 10 to the negative 23, okay? That's roughly the same order of magnitude as we are to the universe. So we have this entire huge universe outside and this entire little universe inside every single human being. And we as human beings can only interact with 1 or 2 orders of magnitude up or down. Otherwise, the universe is simply too big or too small. We just will never be able to know. And that is reality. That's where most of everything lies. That's where most of reality is. It's either up there or inside or everything in between. So I guess my point is, every time when people say, well, aliens, what does that mean? What does that mean? Because most people say aliens in Hollywood and little eggheads running around. There's so much more to it. It doesn't, this is us imposing a Hollywood idea of what an alien should look like. And by the way, let's not forget their anthropomorphic values, right? They look like us, have arms like us, and heads like us, and eyes like us, because we view everything through anthropomorphic eyes. It's the reason why we call our dogs human names and we treat them like humans, because we treat everything as if they have human values, human motivation, human intent, when we may be dealing with something completely different. This could be like artificial intelligence. It's just binary, input in, input out. We don't know. And so these are some of the questions we have to, really, as we're moving down this pathway, this is why I always tell people, look, all options have to be on the table until they're no longer on the table, because we simply don't know.
We also don't know what their intentions are and why they might be here.
That's right.
Why they might be visiting here.
That's right.
Do you have any theories as to what their intentions might be?
Brother, there's a whole range of theories. I mean, it could be simply as like when we're on the African Serengeti and we see the wildebeest and we're in a helicopter and, not to make fun of it, but you sit there and say, oh, that one, we dart it, boom. What do? We land the helicopter, we come out, we draw blood, we do tests. We want to see its diet and its migratory patterns, its health. And then what happens? The wildebeest wakes up, kind of groggy, disoriented, stumbles over to the watering hole. And he's like, hey, Bill, you're not going to believe this, man. This thing came out of the sky. All some weird stuff happened. I was being touched. I woke up and now my butt hurts, right? It could be something as simple as that.
Do you believe any of those reports? Because people do say that they were abducted by aliens.
Well, this is my point, right? So that's one option. The other option could be simply to monitor us. It could be that we are getting very close to being able to replicate what they can do. And if that's the case, maybe technologically we're only 100, 200 years behind. And if that's the case, now all of a sudden we're going to be new neighbors, right? And that could be problematic because our species is very violent. We do a lot of bad things to each other. Are we really ready to go out and meet our potential friends from out of town? I don't know. I mean, we're pretty horrible to each other. So maybe not. Certainly if I was them and I knew we were getting close, I would probably be pretty interested in what we're doing too. As far as the abductions,